Centuries of shifting power, foreign influence, and internal strife. How did these shape the Egypt we know today? Welcome to Blind History with Josh Berry. Over the next few weeks, we will be diving into the history of Egypt. Along for the ride, we are joined by our resident Egyptian expert who will help us explore this wonderfully rich and fascinating history. We'll be tracing the threads of transformation that turned a province of vast Islamic empires into a republic forged in the crucible of revolution.
Thanks for having me. It's a period packed with drama, ambition, and unintended consequences.
So, from 1517 to 1952, what are the key forces at play?
I'd say it's a story of constant negotiation between external powers, the Ottomans, the French, the British, and internal actors, the Mamluks, religious figures, a rising middle class, and of course, the fellahin, the Egyptian peasantry.
Let's start at the beginning. The Ottomans take control in 1517. Was that a straightforward takeover?
Not at all. It's more accurate to describe it as a layering of imperial control over existing power structures. The Ottomans didn't simply erase the Mamluks, for example. They integrated many of them, these emirs, as beyers. They retained vast rural estates, tax rights, and even private armies.
So, a power-sharing arrangement of sorts?
Exactly. You have the Ottoman Pasha, appointed from Istanbul, the Janissary garrisons, and the Mamluk households. This tripartite balance defined governance. The Pasha was there to collect tribute for the empire, a substantial amount, estimated at 700,000 gold ducats annually in the 1520s. But the Mamluks were constantly maneuvering, even orchestrating coups.
Coups? That sounds unstable.
Oh, it was. There were Janissary revolts, assassinations, Bedouin raids. Real authority was constantly shifting. Think of it as a pressure cooker, with periodic purges to maintain a tense equilibrium.
And how did this system impact the average Egyptian, the fellah?
That's where the Iltizam system comes in, and is crucial to understanding the economic realities. The Ottomans, following Mamluk precedent, didn't establish private property in the modern sense. Instead, most of the land, Maryland, about 80% of the cultivable Nile Valley, was technically state domain. This land was then granted as Iltizam, tax farms, auctioned off to the highest bidder.
Tax farms? That sounds like a recipe for exploitation.
Often it was. These multizims, the tax farmers, squeezed the felladi through exorbitant rents and forced labor for irrigation projects. By the 1700s, a single bey might control over 100 villages, extracting up to half of the harvest as rent.
Half the harvest? That's crippling.
It led to chronic fiscal shortfalls for the Ottomans because so much wealth was being siphoned off locally. Istanbul only received a fraction of the projected revenues, and it drove peasants to flee, seeking refuge in swamps or among Bedouin tribes. We will see a recurring theme of wealth extraction and how that impacted the local population. Keep that in mind as we continue.
So, Egypt was a vital breadbasket for the Ottoman Empire, but the local population was suffering. What role did trade play?
Initially, Egypt thrived as a trade hub. Alexandria was a major entrepot for Red Sea caravans carrying spices, coffee, gold, and even slaves from India, Yemen, and Ethiopia. Venetian and French merchants were heavily involved, exporting cotton. But the discovery of the Cape route around Africa by the Portuguese in 1498 and the rise of Dutch shipping really hurt Egypt's transit volume. Customs revenues in Suez dwindled dramatically.
A decline in trade, internal exploitation, it paints a grim picture. What about the social and religious landscape? Was there any sense of Egyptian identity at this time?
Society was highly stratified. You had Ottoman Turkish officials at the top, then the Mamluks, merchants, religious scholars, and the vast majority, the fellahin. Sunni Islam was dominant, with institutions like Al-Azhar playing a key role. But Sufi orders were also very popular, providing charity and organizing festivals that drew huge crowds. And, of course, there were significant Coptic and Jewish communities, who, despite facing discrimination at times, played important roles in the economy.
Let's fast forward to the 18th century. What major shifts were happening?
The Mamluks were regaining power. Figures like Ali Bey al-Kabir declared quasi-independence in the 1760s. They even minted their own coins and allied with France. Meanwhile, Europeans were increasingly infiltrating the economy, brokering grain deals and establishing trading posts. The Mamluk armies, while large, were becoming outmatched by European military advancements.
Which brings us to Napoleon, the French expedition in 1798. A shock to the system, as they say. What was the impact?
It was transformative. Napoleon's invasion exposed the vulnerabilities of the Mamluk regime and the Ottoman hold on Egypt. The French, despite their eventual expulsion, brought with them not just military force, but also scientific and cultural ideas. They catalogued everything, obelisks, plants, even fellahin sanitation habits, in the Description de l'Egypte. They discovered the Rosetta Stone, unlocking hieroglyphs.
A cultural awakening alongside military occupation.
Absolutely. The French also introduced printing presses, publishing Arabic pamphlets and newspapers, but, of course, their presence was also marked by heavy requisitions and suppression of revolts. The invasion ultimately failed, but it left a lasting mark. As our source says, Egypt glimpsed Europe's bayonets and books, priming its appetite for change.
That's a powerful quote. What does it tell us?
It encapsulates the dual impact of the French occupation. On one hand, it was a brutal military conquest. On the other, it exposed Egypt to new ideas and technologies that would fuel modernization efforts in the following century. It shattered the old order and created a vacuum for new leadership to emerge.
Which brings us to Muhammad Ali, often seen as the founder of modern Egypt. Who was he, and how did he rise to power?
Muhammad Ali was an Albanian officer in the Ottoman army. He arrived in Egypt in 1801. Through shrewd political maneuvering, allying with some factions, bribing others, he managed to consolidate his power. A key moment was the Citadel Massacre in 1811, where he eliminated hundreds of Mamluks, solidifying his monopoly on power.
Ruthless, but effective. What were his priorities once he was in charge?
His main focus was modernizing the military and the administration. He built a new army based on European models, conscripting fellahin and training them with the help of European advisors. He established ministries to centralize control and generate revenue. His budget in the 1820s was substantial, with a large portion dedicated to the military.
And how did he finance these ambitious projects?
Through state capitalism. He seized a large portion of cultivable land and established monopolies on key crops like cotton, indigo, and rice. Peasants were given a fixed share of the yield, while the state resold it at a significant markup. He also built factories, although they struggled to compete with European industries. Let's remember this point about wealth extraction from the local people.
So, the fellahin were still bearing the brunt of these changes?
Absolutely. They faced conscription, forced labor on massive projects like the Mahmoudiya Canal, and heavy taxation. While a new elite class of officers and bureaucrats are in prison, the fellahin continued to struggle, and one of the most astonishing worst pieces of sail in the rest of the world. Though there was resistance, of course, including riots and desertion.
Muhammad Ali also expanded Egypt's reach, didn't he?
Yes, he reconquered Hijaz, invaded Sudan, and even challenged the Ottoman Empire itself, taking control of Syria and parts of Anatolia. But his ambitions were ultimately checked by European powers who imposed the London Treaty of 1840, limiting his army and solidifying hereditary rule within his family.
So, a powerful state, but still constrained by external forces. Let's move on to his successors. How did they build on his legacy?
They inherited a formidable state machine, but they also pushed it towards financial ruin. They embraced European glamour and modernization, but at the cost of massive foreign debt. Ismail Pasha, for example, built palaces, opera houses, and railways, but he did so by borrowing heavily from European banks at exorbitant interest rates.
Ismail's known for saying, Egypt is no longer in Africa. What did that mean?
It reflects his desire to transform Egypt into a European-style nation, both culturally and economically. He invested heavily in infrastructure, particularly in Cairo, building boulevards, gaslighting, and modern amenities. But this came at a tremendous cost, deepening Egypt's dependence on foreign capital.
And of course, there's the Suez Canal, a transformative project, but also a symbol of foreign control.
Exactly. Ferdinand de Lesseps secured the concession for the canal in 1854, and it opened in 1869. It drastically shortened the route between Europe and India, making Egypt a vital strategic artery. But Egypt's share of the profits was minimal, and the construction involved brutal forced labor. When Ismail ran into financial trouble, he was forced to sell Egypt's shares in the canal to Britain, further solidifying their influence.
So, a lifeline and a leash, as the chapter title puts it. The debt crisis deepened, leading to even greater foreign control. How did that manifest itself?
The cotton crash after the U.S. Civil War exacerbated Ismail's debt, which was already ballooning. European powers established the Caisse de la Dette Publique to manage Egypt's finances, effectively taking control of its revenues. They imposed dual control, with British and French officials having veto power over the budget. Taxes were doubled, and Egyptians were increasingly excluded from positions of power. This all culminated in the Arabi Revolt.
A revolt with the rallying cry, Egypt for the Egyptians. Who was Arabi and what did he stand for?
Arabi was a fellah officer who rose through the ranks of the army. He represented the growing resentment of Egyptian officers who were excluded from the highest positions, which were still dominated by Circassian and Turkish pashas. He demanded reforms, including an elected assembly and greater Egyptian representation in the army.
And the British response?
They bombarded Alexandria and then invaded, defeating Arabi's forces at Tel el-Kebri in 1882. Arabi was exiled, and Britain began its long occupation of Egypt. They claimed it was temporary, but their troops remained for 75 years.
A temporary occupation that reshaped Egyptian society. How did the British rule?
Through indirect rule. They maintained the facade of Ottoman suzerainty and Egyptian self-governance, but the real power lay with the British consul general, like Lord Cromer. Cromer focused on balancing the budget, developing irrigation, and promoting cotton production, but he also stifled industrial development to protect British interests.
So Egypt became even more reliant on cotton exports.
Exactly. And while infrastructure improved and taxes were rationalized, the benefits were unevenly distributed. Local industry suffered, and this wealth gap just kept getting wider and wider.
You know, we've been talking a lot about external pressures, Ottoman rule, French occupation, British control. But what about the internal dynamics? Were there any movements for change coming from within Egyptian society?
Definitely. The rise of the Effendiya, the educated middle class, was crucial. Institutions like the American University in Cairo and the Kedaville Law School produced a new generation of intellectuals and professionals who challenged the status quo. Journalists and activists like Mustafa Kemal began to advocate for Egyptian independence.
And what was the prevailing sentiment among the Egyptian people during this period of British rule?
There was a growing sense of nationalism and a desire for self-determination. The Denshawai incident in 1976, where Egyptian peasants were severely punished for a minor incident involving British officers, really galvanized the nationalist movement. But alongside this, there were also tensions between different communities, including Copts and Muslims.
World War I then throws everything into chaos. How did it impact Egypt?
Britain declared Egypt a protectorate in 1914, severing the last ties with the Ottoman Empire. Egypt became a crucial base for British military operations, particularly for the defense of the Suez Canal. Egyptian fellahin were conscripted for forced labor, and the economy was squeezed to support the war effort. Inflation soared, leading to widespread discontent. As one account says, official records tally 60,000 deaths from heat stroke, typhoid, and exhaustion, though fellah ballads whispered of 200,000 sons of the Nile swallowed by sand.
That's a staggering human cost. What does this excerpt reveal about the relationship between the British and the Egyptians at this time?
It highlights the brutal reality of imperial power. While official accounts downplayed the suffering, the folk memory preserved the true scale of the tragedy. It underscores the exploitation of Egyptian resources and labor for the benefit of the British Empire, fueling resentment and ultimately contributing to the 1919 revolution.
So, the war exacerbated existing tensions and created a fertile ground for revolution. Tell us about the 1919 revolution and the role of Saad Zaghloul.
Saad Zaghloul emerged as the leader of the Wafd, a delegation formed to demand Egyptian representation at the Versailles Peace Conference. When the British arrested Zaghloul and deported him to Malta, it sparked a nationwide uprising. Students, workers, peasants, and women all participated in protests, strikes, and acts of sabotage. The revolution forced the British to grant nominal independence in 1922.
Nominal independence? What did that actually mean?
It meant that Britain retained control over key areas, including communications, defense, protection of foreign interests, and the Suez Canal zone. Egypt had a constitution and a parliament, but the palace and the British continued to interfere in politics. It was a fractured democracy, marked by political instability and endless intrigue. The Wafd Party won landslide victories, but was repeatedly dissolved by the king or the British.
And what about the economy and society during this liberal era?
The Great Depression hit Egypt hard, devastating the cotton industry. Rural bankruptcies soared, and landlessness increased. There were some efforts at industrialization, but they were hampered by British restrictions. Meanwhile, new social movements emerged, including the Muslim Brotherhood, labor unions, and feminist organizations, each with their own vision for Egypt's future.
The Muslim Brotherhood, a force that would play a significant role in later Egyptian history. What were their goals at this time?
Founded in 1928, they sought to promote Islamic values and challenge what they saw as the secular poison of Western influence. They provided social services and established a network of schools and clinics. They were critical of both the Wafd and the British, advocating for a more Islamic state.
World War II arise. How did it impact Egypt?
Egypt became a crucial strategic location once again. Despite Farouk's flirting with the Axis powers, Egypt hosted a large number of British troops. The Battle of El Alamein was a turning point in the North African campaign. But the war also brought economic hardship, inflation, and social unrest. This is how we ended up full circle, where we see wealth being taken from the lower classes of society.
And the post-war period?
It was a period of crisis and instability. The 1948 Palestine War was a disaster for Egypt, exposing corruption and incompetence within the monarchy. Student riots, worker strikes, and clashes between the Wafd and the Muslim Brotherhood created a sense of anarchy. This paved the way for the Free Officers movement and the 1952 revolution.
The Free Officers, led by Gamal Abdel Nasser. What were their motivations?
They were young, nationalist officers who were disillusioned with the corruption of the monarchy and the continued British presence. They sought to purge corruption, end the occupation, and implement land reform. As Nasser himself said, "The army is the nation's conscience."
Let's analyze that quote. What does it tell us about the Free Officers' view of their role in Egyptian society?
It reveals their self-perception as the saviors of the nation, the only force capable of cleansing Egypt of its ills and leading it towards a brighter future. It also hints at a certain authoritarian tendency, a belief that the military has a special responsibility to guide the country, even against the will of the people.
So, the army is the ultimate arbiter of national interest.
Exactly. And that's a legacy that continues to resonate in Egypt today.
The 1952 revolution itself was swift and relatively bloodless. How did it unfold?
On July 23, 1952, the Free Officers seized control of Cairo, surrounding key government buildings and radio stations. Farouk was forced to abdicate, and a regency was established in the name of his infant son. The RCC, the Revolutionary Command Council, took power, promising a new era of social justice and national independence.
And what were the immediate consequences of the revolution?
The SEC implemented land reform, redistributed land to peasants, and purged corrupt officials. They banned the Muslim Brotherhood and declared Egypt a republic in 1953. Nasser gradually consolidated his power, ousting Agib and establishing himself as the dominant figure. The Suez Evacuation Treaty in 1954 finally ended the British occupation. These were the foundations of the Egypt we know today.
So, from Ottoman province to military-led republic, a long and complex journey. Throughout our conversation, we've touched on themes of foreign influence, internal power struggles, economic exploitation, and the rise of nationalism. It's really all about power and how it impacts the people.
And that brings us back to the quote we discussed earlier. Egypt glimpsed Europe's bayonets and books, priming its appetite for change.
Earlier, we talked about the constant extraction of wealth from the working class in Egypt.
It really does. The key takeaway is that modern Egypt was forged in the crucible of these interacting forces, leaving a lasting impact on its political, economic, and social structures. The echoes of conquest, reform, and occupation continue to resonate in Cairo's corridors of power today.
So in essence, we're talking about a struggle for sovereignty. From Salim I's banners to Nasser's Suez defiance, Egypt's story is one of constantly wrestling with internal and external forces.
Exactly. It's a story of resilience, adaptation, and the enduring quest for self-determination. But to think about the core assumptions, it's easy to assume the British occupation was all bad. They also brought a lot of infrastructure to the country. That's the tension of the whole thing. And it is still being worked out in Egypt today.
Now, thinking about why this history matters today, understanding this long arc is crucial for grasping the challenges and opportunities facing Egypt in the 21st century. The legacy of foreign intervention, the complexities of Egyptian identity, the role of the military in politics, these are all rooted in this transformative period. So we will wrap it up here for today, but stay tuned for more history of Egypt. The full audio article will be released this upcoming Sunday for a thorough exploration of this fascinating history. Next, we will be wrapping up with modern and contemporary Egypt, 1952, present. Join us next time on Blind History with Josh Berry. I'll leave you with this. Given the enduring impact of these historical forces, what are the most promising pathways for Egypt to achieve genuine and sustainable sovereignty in the years to come?